So hi everyone, over 150 people registered for today's event. So let's start with the run of show while colleagues join us. We are recording today. The video will be available on Sustainable Westchester's YouTube channel, which hosts the rest of our webinar and live event recordings. The link will be included in a post-event email. If everyone could please be mindful of a few items to help our virtual event run smoothly. Take a moment to check your settings and confirm that you are on mute. We welcome you to keep your video on or off, but keep in mind that with your video on, your bandwidth may be impacted. So off may be the better option for increased connectivity. We have built-in Q&A periods into our agenda, so please enter your questions into the chat and we will do our best to answer them. Should any questions go unanswered, we will follow up by email. I'm Rachel Carpatella, Director of Commercial Clean Heating and Cooling with Sustainable Westchester, a program supported by NYSERDA, and I'm your host for today's NYStretch webinar and workshop. It's great to see so many familiar and new faces. Some of you I've worked hand in hand with on sustainability initiatives, attended events in the city together during UN Climate Week, and aided in your community's goals when they went unsupported by the federal government. As of yesterday evening, the United States of America has signed the paperwork to rejoin the Paris Climate Accord. The new administration, the president has said that this process will take consultation with mayors and governors. Your leadership may have a greater opportunity than ever before to become not just a statewide model or nationwide model, but an international model of what is possible when a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens and their municipal governments take action and enact policy toward our sustainable future. With 39% of greenhouse gas emissions coming from buildings, we know that we can't set precedent alone, let alone meet the goals of the New York State CLCPA or the Paris Climate Accord without ensuring that development is done with sustainability at the forefront. The NYStretch code provides all you need to do just that. Our first session today is from 10 o'clock to 10:30 a.m. The NYStretch code, meeting energy and climate goals through building energy. Welcome remarks. I've just delivered them and I will continue to deliver them. And the clean energy communities and the role of building energy, presented by Carla Cavillo, Deputy Executive Director for the Hudson Valley Regional Council and the Clean Energy Communities Coordinator. We'll also have a presentation by called the NYStretch Code Overview by Marilyn Dare, Senior Project Manager, Energy Code, NYSERDA. And a NYStretch Municipal Leader Perspective brought to you by Mayor Nikki Armacost of Village of Hastings on Hudson. Following our first session, we'll have a second session, which we will dive into the agenda later on. That will be a workshop. And Sustainable Westchester, our role is to support our member municipalities in your journey towards sustainability leadership. We are your partner through programs like Westchester Power, Commercial Clean Heating and Cooling, and Community Solar. We help you navigate federal, state, and local programs to set and achieve sustainability goals, programs like NYStretch. If you'd like any more information about the things I've just touched upon, ways that Sustainable Westchester can support and partner with you, please feel free to reach out to me, Rachel Carpatella, at my email, rachel@sustainablewestchester.org, or call or text me anytime. It is with great pleasure that I will now introduce Carla Cavillo. She is the Deputy Executive Director at the Hudson Valley Regional Council. Carla directs NYSERDA's Clean Energy Communities Program in the Mid-Hudson region. promoting economic development and supporting municipal cost savings through energy efficiency and clean energy projects that results in reductions in municipal energy use and greenhouse gas emissions. Carla volunteers in the town of Cornwall, chairing the Cornwall CAC. She partnered with schools to implement recycling programs and most recently served as an appointed member of the Town of Cornwall Comprehensive Plan Committee. Carla previously worked in Philadelphia, focusing on sustainability and neighborhood revitalization at the neighborhood, city, and regional levels, while at New Kensington CDC, Recycle Bank, the Reinvestment Fund, and the Philadelphia Redevelopment Authority. Welcome, Carla.
Thank you so much, Rachel. It is such a pleasure to partner today with Sustainable Westchester, NYSERDA, the Village of Hastings on Hudson, and the City of Beacon on the NYStretch Energy Code webinar. Next slide, please. As you already know, my name is Carla Castillo, and I've been Deputy Executive Director at the Hudson Valley Regional Council since 2016. I, along with Anila, my colleague Anila Cherian, provide technical support on the to Mid-Hudson municipalities on the NYSERDA Clean Energy Communities and New York State Climate Smart Communities programs. As you can see here, HVRC is one of 9 regional councils in the state and one of over 600 nationally that provide technical support to municipalities across various programmatic areas. Along with my colleagues listed here, the other staff members at HVRC, HVRC prides itself in providing impartial, transparent, and informative support to local governments across our regional work. Next slide, please. Today, you will be hearing from additional presenters on the value of NYStretch Energy Code adoption. As you know, NYStretch code adoption is an important element of Governor Cuomo's nation-leading Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. Adoption results in on-site energy savings and reduces greenhouse gas emissions by reducing energy load requirements. NYSERDA presenters today will speak to the various benefits of adoption, including energy and cost savings, short payback period for construction and substantial rehab projects, and other benefits to building occupants. Please note that today's presentation is geared toward the Mid-Hudson region's climate design zones. And then presenters from Hastings on Hudson and Beacon will share the motivations that led to NYStretch Energy Code adoption for their communities. Next slide. Together, today's speakers will frame NYStretch as an important action most New York State communities can take in support of the state's greenhouse gas emissions reduction goals, while also accruing long-term energy and cost savings for constituents and communities. Those communities that embark on NYStretch adoption quickly may also receive additional benefits through the soon-to-be launched leadership round of the NYSERDA Clean Energy Communities program. On launching of the leadership round, next slide, please. Local governments will have the opportunity to join the 592 participating communities statewide by pursuing completion of approximately 24 high-impact actions and sub-actions. For those of you who are familiar with the CEC program, that's quite a bit of a little bit of a change. NYStretch Energy Code adoption is one of the new actions that is expected to be included. The leadership round will offer undesignated communities the opportunity to become a designated clean energy community. And all communities, regardless of designation status, will be eligible for various levels of grant awards under the leadership round's new structure. So as an overview, in addition to designation grants for completion of 4 high-impact actions, additional grant awards will be available to communities by accumulating points for completed high-impact actions. These will be called point-based grants. By completing certain high-impact actions associated with specific grant awards, these will be called action grants. And for those communities receiving grant awards of a specified amount, by completing projects in disadvantaged communities. These will be called bonus grants. The leadership round will be available on the NYSERDA CEC portal via the hyperlink provided here once it launches. Please stay tuned for upcoming information sessions that will be announced once the leadership round launches. And as with the first round of the NYSERDA CEC program, all grants will be available on a first come, first served basis. Next slide. Oops, no, previous slide. didn't realize we were on the wrong slide. Sorry about that. As many of you may know, the New York Stretch Climate Smart Communities program is a sister program of the NYSERDA CEC program. This slide with the current CEC high impact actions on the left shows the degree to which both the clean energy and climate smart programs are coordinated, making it easier for municipalities to continue their great accomplishments and gain recognition under both programs. The launch of the leadership round will be accompanied by an updated crosswalk, which will be available to all communities on the New York State Climate Smart portal. In other words, when an eligible community adopts the New York Stretch Energy Code, it will also have completed an action under the New York State Climate Smart Communities program. I'll now turn the webinar back to Rachel, who will announce the next speaker. I hope our combined speakers will pique your interest in New York Stretch Energy Code adoption and your continued participation in the NYSERDA Clean Energy Communities program. Anila will close today's webinar with next steps and contacts for the information provided in the webinar. And we all look forward to supporting your adoption of the New York Stretch Energy Code. Thank you.
Well, my interest is certainly piqued. Thank you so much, Carla. Now I have the pleasure of introducing Marilyn Dare. She has worked at NYSERDA for over 22 years, promoting market transformation and energy efficiency in the commercial and industrial sectors. As a semi-retired senior project manager on NYSERDA's codes team, Marilyn's responsibilities include program design and activities to encourage and facilitate the development and adoption of Stretch Energy and Stretch to Zero codes. She's a certified energy manager and is lighting certified through the National Council on Qualifications for the Lighting Professions. Welcome.
Great, thank you, Rachel, and good morning. Thank you so much for joining us today. And again, thank you to the Sustainable Westchester for hosting and coordinating this informational presentation on the New York Stretch Code. So let me jump right in. Next slide, please. So Carol has already alluded to this. Why are we talking about a Stretch Energy Code? Because we have the CLCPA, which is the most ambitious climate act in the country. Quite simply, if we are to meet state and local efficiency goals, we cannot continue on a business as usual path. New York State's energy code is typically a one code cycle, which is every 3 years, behind all the national energy codes that it's based on. With a business as usual path, we will not be able to achieve the goal for the state that was established by Governor Cuomo of net zero new construction by 2031. With stretch energy codes, when we assume about a 10% more efficient code each code cycle, it helps us move much more quickly towards that goal. Energy efficiency is key to reaching the goals of the CLCPA. Remember that buildings built today will be here for 50 to 100 years. We need to make them as efficient as possible today. And advanced energy codes will help us achieve those goals. Next slide, please. So what is the New York Stretch Energy Code? It quite simply is a readily adoptable local energy code that is allowed by the energy law for municipalities to adopt. It is on average about 11% more efficient than the New York State Code, meaning 11% less energy use and 11% energy cost savings. On average, it has about less than a 10-year payback. NYSERDA spent a lot of time vetting this energy code, not only with a diverse stakeholder group, but also with the Building Code Council. And the Building Code Council has recognized it as a more stringent energy code. It overlays the 2020 State Energy Code, It overlays the 2020 State Energy Code, which was adopted in May by New York State. It prepares municipalities, architects, and builders for the future energy codes that are coming down the pike. It's based on proven technologies. It's not rocket science. These are proven commercially available technologies and systems that integrate best practices. And it is a pivotal tool in supporting energy climate goals, such as your own and the CLCPA. And as I mentioned, there was a diverse stakeholder and public review of this energy code to make sure that it was agreeable and achievable for the public. Next slide, please. As you can see, we're working with many communities in understanding New York Stretch and helping them with the adoption process all across the Hudson Valley, Long Island, and communities upstate. And builders and developers that we've spoken to who are already building high performance buildings feel that NYStretch is a great stepping stone to higher performing buildings and a better built environment. Next slide, please. The leaders of the communities that have already adopted NYStretch have expressed their satisfaction in having adopted it. I hope that your community will soon be one of them. And with that, I have the pleasure of introducing our next two speakers. Eleanor Peck and Anthony Ridgerio will be presenting in the second round. And they were the first community from Beacon, New York. They were the first community outside of New York City to adopt NYStretch. The commitment of these two people and the leadership of the City Council brought about one of the fastest adoptions of NYStretch that we've experienced to date. But first, you're going to hear from Mayor Nikki Armacost of Hastings on Hudson. Mayor Armacost is the first elected leader to contact NYSERDA directly about adopting NYStretch. Her enthusiasm and commitment to addressing climate change is contagious. She's been the mayor of Hastings on Hudson since 2019, and before that was the village trustee since 2009. She is the founder and managing director of ARC Finance Limited, a not-for-profit organization that finances clean energy and water in the developing world. And she's also an advisor to a number of solar companies, microfinance organizations that work in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. As mayor, Nikki has been a champion of sustainability initiatives and building local resiliency to climate change. And under her leadership, the village of Hastings on Hudson has attained the Silver Climate Smart Community status by undertaking a wide range of actions, including the adoption of NYSERDA, opening up financing for energy efficiency and green infrastructure through the open CPACE financing, and passing a low embodied carbon concrete resolution. Her approach is intentionally broad. Her administration has made advancements on stewardship of natural resources, investments in EVs, and alternative fuel infrastructure, resiliency planning, as well as buying local initiatives. And with that, please welcome Mayor Nikki Armacost.
Thank you so much, Marilyn, for that lovely introduction. And thanks to Carla Cavillo, Anila Cherian of the Hudson Valley Regional Council and the team at Sustainable Westchester for asking me to share the experience of Hastings on Hudson at this important seminar. It really is a delight to be with you today. And Rachel, I was very thrilled to hear you give a shout out to rejoining the Paris Accord along with other climate mayors. I'm super excited about that happening. So for all of you on the webinar, the organizers gave me the task of sharing the municipal perspective, really to explain why Hastings prioritized the adoption of the Stretch Energy Code and to give you a little bit of a sense of the process we used. First of all, I just want to start out giving you a little tiny bit of background. I'm not sure where everyone is from who's on the call, but we're a village located on the banks of the Hudson River, about 20 miles north of Midtown Manhattan. We have a lot of residents who are committed to environmental stewardship, and we've worked hard on a number of issues that push the needle in terms of sustainability, energy efficiency, and climate resilience. And just to give you a flavor, we were the first municipality in New York State to ban both plastic bags and foam food containers back in 2014, and we take collective pride in being progressive on environmental issues. So you can see this topic's right up our alley. An important part of our NYSERDA story is that we're part of the two programs run by New York State, the Clean Energy Communities Program and the Climate Smart Communities Program that Carla talked about earlier. These programs have been really fantastic for us as a village. They've enabled us to prioritize policies and initiatives that have multiple benefits for our environment and our economy. And so starting in September 2019, when we established our Climate Smart Communities Task Force, we began documenting a broad range of actions we'd completed that fitted under the CSC rubric that Carla described. I was starting to think more strategically about advancement and set a goal that some of my team told me was way too ambitious, of reaching bronze status in January 2020 and then silver status by June 2020. And ultimately, we did achieve both of those goals. But at that time, I started to look for CSC actions that might make sense for us to pursue within that timeframe. Our CSC and CEC liaison, Carla, who you heard from earlier, knew how passionate I am about sustainability issues. And in passing, in a conversation about something completely different, she asked me if I was interested in the New York Stretch Code. And I told her I needed to know more. So she hooked me up with Marilyn and Mike DeWitt. And after a long conversation where they presented the case for New York Stretch, I was persuaded that it was not going to be that complicated for us. The template legislation was already drafted, relieving the potential burden on our attorney. And it was also clear to me, and Marilyn, I think, spoke to this a little bit, that before too long, New York Stretch is going to be the standard for New York State anyway. So it was going to give us a little bit of a heads up on that process. But, you know, as all of you know who are elected officials, the acid test for any new legislative initiative is securing buy-in from key local stakeholders. So I invited Marilyn and Mike to speak to our Green Building Code Committee, which includes our building inspector, as he was going to be the person who would need to enforce this code. And by coincidence, the committee was in the process of updating our Green Building Code. And they immediately saw that the New York Stretch Code would make this updating process much easier for them. They also quickly understood that the code will soon become the standard requirement, and pointed out to me that the stretch part would actually really not be a stretch for that much longer. They had some questions. For example, they wanted to know if it would focus only on new buildings. They were concerned about it having a retroactive effect, which we settled for them. And after getting solid responses to their various questions from Marilyn and Mike, they enthusiastically endorsed the adoption of the code by the Board of Trustees and started the process of integrating it into their updates of the Green Building Code. I then invited Marilyn to come and speak to the Village Board of Trustees, where she made a clear, concise case outlining the benefits of adopting the code. And in the end, we prioritized passing the code for several reasons. So these were the things that were most compelling to us, but she had a whole bunch of other reasons that were important. So the first thing was that it was super easy. The stretch code doesn't require any extra effort or research. The municipality simply adopts the template legislation. So it's really a policy decision for the board. And we decided that due to the various benefits that it offered, and the fact that it was very much aligned with what our Green Building Code Committee was already proposing, it was really a no-brainer for our community from a policy perspective. Secondly, we felt it would actually lessen the load on our code officials. Our building inspector was enthusiastically on board, and one of the most compelling arguments to him was that on a practical level, the code will prepare him and us for future code cycle updates. And third, of course, the stretch code makes environmental and economic sense. As Marilyn said, it's based on proven technology, systems, and construction techniques. It integrates best practices from programs like Energy Star for homes. It saves energy and money. It results in less energy usage and in reduced operating costs. It actually increases property values as more home and business owners and even tenants look for green and efficient buildings. And the code, for me, one of the most important things was that the code will support us in achieving our energy and greenhouse gas reduction goals and will be a pivotal tool in supporting our energy and climate goals. In the end, we adopted the code on June 18th of 2020 and were the first municipality in Westchester County and the second in New York. I'm very excited to hear Beacon's story coming up in a little while. And the whole process from my initial conversation with Carla, which happened on April 29th, to adopting the code on June 18th, took less than 2 months. It really is the speediest legislative process we've ever been through. And that is in large measure thanks to the excellent preparation work done by Marilyn and her team. But it was really it really was painless. So for other elected officials and municipal leaders on the call, in our experience, passing New York Stretch was remarkably easy, and explaining its benefits was really not complicated at all. We had no opposition to the new legislation from anyone in the community, and it was passed unanimously by the board. So I hope that that little narrative is helpful. Thanks again for including me, and for anyone who's on the call, if you have more questions and want to drill down on any of those issues, please feel free to reach out. And thanks again for having me.
Thank you, Mayor Armacost. Marilyn Dare is now going to introduce our next speakers. Or no, we're Q&A discussion now. Sorry about that. We now have our quick Q&A. We have 2 minutes. I'm starting with the first question that we received from Daisy in the chat. And the question is, could you speak more to applying stretch to additions on old homes and for homes that are being gutted and updated?
Sure. Is that to me, do you suppose, or?
I think that would be great, Marilyn.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. So the New York Stretch Code is applied in the same fashion as the Energy Code is. And the State Energy Code has requirements for additions, alterations, and renovations of existing buildings. So if there was a home that was having an addition applied to the existing home, then that addition would need to comply with the New York Stretch Code. I do believe that my colleague, Mike Dewine, is going to talk more about this in his presentation. So I'll leave that, that more detailed discussion to Mike.
Let me also add, please, if I may, that that's a very complicated subject. I'm glad to take that on with you, that question, and your code officials. And I know that it will be included in the soon to hit the streets New York Stretch training. So.
Thanks, Mike. Another quick question in Huntington from Billy Roberti. In Huntington, we are concerned because some architects feel this is a big ask. There are also concerns that because we have more stringent codes than our neighboring communities, builders will move their development elsewhere. Do you have any suggestions in getting these other nearby towns to pass the New York Stretch too, so that we do not have to have this issue? Such a popular question. So let's, Marilyn, would you take that possibly? Sure. Mike, are you gonna?
It is a very popular question. And Mike, I'll just do a lead in and then let you take it over from there. What we're finding is there are a lot of architects and builders and developers out there that are already doing beyond code construction, and that we don't see it as that big of an ask, but I think that Mike will talk a little bit more about that. As for other communities, to get the other communities to adopt, we have been talking about whether or not a county-wide adoption of New York Stretch, getting communities within a county to band together and agree to adopt New York Stretch would be helpful. We've seen a lot on both sides, and I think Mayor Armacost and Anthony and Eleanor will be speaking a little bit more about that as well. Mike, did you want to add to the big ask?
Yeah, I would just add to that it never happens, or rarely happens, that somebody moves their development or building plans. It's something we do here, and normally if people are to the point of dealing with the codes, headed towards design and what have you, they've made their decisions, they've made their investment in property, they've made their decision to build in your town or village or city. It just doesn't happen very often. That's the reality of it, in all the years I've been supporting energy codes.
Mayor Armacost,
Yeah, I just wanted to add, we have not had that experience, but what we did do was provide insight and kind of assurance to Dobbs Ferry, which went on to pass the code. So we now have Hastings, we have Dobbs Ferry, and we'll work our way up the Hudson till we reach Beacon. And by then, I think we'll have a critical mass of municipalities that have passed the code. but it wasn't actually in reality something that that was a concern in our municipality.
Thank you so much. And we have a comment from James Hartford saying, architects, builders, and communities shouldn't fight against what better quality building, which is really what this is about in a nutshell. And I would even go to say better quality buildings increase property value and increase the investment that developers might have in your community. We're going to move forward to the workshop section. Here's our agenda for our second session. This is from 10:30 to 11:30, and we encourage everyone to join us for this portion. It's the workshop, practical application of NYStretch code. We have Leading the Way on NYStretch, the City of Beacon case study presented by Eleanor Peck, Climate Smart Coordinator, and Anthony Ridgerio, City Administrator, City of Beacon. Practical application and deep dive into NYStretch, presented by Mike Dewine, NYSERDA NYStretch Code Circuit Writer. And next steps for municipalities, presented by Anila Cherian, Clean Energy Communities Coordinator. I will now present, NYStretch, Marilyn Dare will now introduce our next presenters.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So very happy to have representatives from the City of Beacon. Eleanor Peck is the City of Beacon's Climate Smart Coordinator and also works for the Carey Institute of Ecosystem Studies in Millbrook. And Anthony Ridgerio, who is City of Beacon's third city administrator since 2015 and brings to the City of Beacon over 23 years of public service. Prior to working for the City of Beacon, he was appointed as the City of Peekskills City Manager and has worked for the City of Peekskill since 2000 up until the 2015 as Assistant City Planner, Director of Planning, and had served as Acting City Manager on a number of occasions. So please welcome both Anthony and Eleanor.
Thank you, everybody. As was mentioned, Anthony Ridgerio, I'm the City Administrator, and we have Eleanor Peck, our Climate Smart Coordinator, with us today. I just wanted to take a couple minutes, or a couple seconds, if you will, just to kind of go through not only with the stretch code, but the City of Beacon has actually done quite a bit for the climate that actually we're very proud of. We think we're kind of on the forefront and the leading edge. We've constructed our own solar farm. We've converted all of our streetlights to LED. We have the city owns 4 charging stations. We're in the process of purchasing electric vehicles. We've done a number of codes. We have our electric vehicle purchasing policy and our green purchasing policy, actually, that we just adopted a couple of weeks ago. We're also a Silver Climate Smart community. I understand the second city, but 6th municipality. I know Eleanor could probably speak a little more on that. So we're very proud of that. We're proud of our direction from our council and our staff kind of moving those projects forward, and certainly with Eleanor's help as our Climate Smart Coordinator. I'll let her go through our presentations and if there's any questions at the end. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. My name's Eleanor Peck, and you can go to the next slide, please. I'm just gonna go through a short timeline of how we adopted the NYStretch. I was hired in September of 2019, and in the first few months, a number of our city council members approached me to ask about increasing our energy code and improving it. So I reached out to the former CEC coordinator, Europa McGovern, about help getting the city council more information about efficient building codes. I didn't even know the NYStretch was an option at that point. And Europa put me in touch with Marilyn Dare, and Anthony suggested that me and our code enforcement official speak with Marilyn directly before we brought anything to the city council. So Marilyn, our code enforcement official, and I spoke on the phone in January. Happened very quickly, as the mayor of Hastings on Hudson mentioned. And by March, we had Marilyn speak to the city council. Our code enforcement official had a number of questions for Marilyn over the phone, but she was able to address all of them adequately, and he left the call feeling comfortable if we did end up passing the stretch code. So Marilyn and Mike spoke at Beacon City Council in March, and in April we passed it. And in May we got approval from New York State, so that is now our official energy code. Next slide, please. So I just want to go through a little discussion of how it happened and what happened in the city council meeting, that sort of thing. Our mayor, I think, summed this up pretty nicely. He's a very practical, no nonsense guy. And he said, you know, this is the code that's presented by the state. It's based on the existing code. It just accelerates the implementation. It's not dramatically different, just a step ahead. Again, this echoes what's been said previously, but it made a big impact, I think, in our discussion. We did have one comment during the public hearing against passing New York Stretch. That was against the toxic chemicals and spray foam insulation, but they decided to pass it anyway. I do want to note this was April 2020, so the Zoom was very new. We only had one member of the public on the call. This was, you know, right at the very scary beginnings of the pandemic. And so I think, you know, since then, this summer in particular, we had hundreds of people on the call, and it might have been a different story, but this was a pretty unique time in the history of Beacon for sure. Next slide, please. I also want to give some local context. We have had significant public discussion around new development and continued development in the city of Beacon. We had 2 6-month water discussions around water moratoriums, not water moratoriums, building moratoriums surrounded by water in recent years. Anthony can speak better to those than I can. And this was a new city council brought in January 2020 that really, they ran on the development issue in town. In January and February, right before the pandemic, the mayor and city council held 2 public forums around the issue of development in town. So they were really eager to do something and make a difference and show that they were passing something related to the issue around development. So I'm gonna leave it there, see if anyone has any further questions. I will say we have had the code for a few months now, and we're using the performance-based path. And we have also found that buildings are meeting the code pretty easily, as someone, I'm not sure, I think Marilyn mentioned, you know, builders are already doing this. They've already sort of come up to this. So we're really matching them in a lot of regards. We have not had significant conversations with builders or developers who are against this.
Thank you so much, Eleanor and Anthony. It's absolutely inspiring to see what Beacon has done. I will now introduce Mike Dewine. North Branch Service Principal Mike Dewine has almost 40 years experience in New York and nationwide in energy efficiency, building science, and energy code development, implementation, and training. He has trusted boot on the ground experience, starting his career as a high performance home builder and remodeler. Previously, Mike worked at the New York State Energy Office, the Alliance to Save Energy, and notably assembled a winning team for the Illinois Building Energy Code Enhancement Program. Welcome, Mike.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Rachel. Much obliged. And yes, I'm the old guy. I did all this stuff for too many years, perhaps. Thanks again. Thank you to all the supporting organizations. And most importantly, I'm just blown away by how many attendees we have. And I encourage you to support Sustainable Westchester and all the organizations here. And I'm just really honored to be speaking and working with you on this, and look forward to working with you on the New York Stretch adoption if you go there. And of course, after today, you will. Anyway, next slide, please. So, you know, what is the New York Stretch code? Give you a little more background on it. And I do know Marilyn mentioned some of these. It is readily adaptable. The most important point being that it is an overlay of the existing, relatively new base energy code for New York State that went into effect last March. It is in the same template, if you will, and format. All the features of it does and will, in an actual all-in-one code book, drop into the Energy Code of New York State. So for code officials to use it, it's very simple because, you know, The game's the same, just a few numbers have changed, essentially. It is very well vetted, as Marilyn suggested, and it is based on and referenced from all of the state of the shelf, if you will, rather than state of the art technologies that are quite well proven. And you know, I have to say this every time I talk about energy codes. It's the best baseline to address building energy efficiency, energy use, and clean energy footprint, if you will. Next slide. A lot of benefits to the New York Stretch and the energy code as well. It can increase any community growth. It's well known that people look at communities in terms of what their services are. Quality construction is one of them. Communities do take part in a building codes effectiveness grading schedule that actually sets our local insurance rates. And the better the code is enforced and complied with, the better rating you get. And it does increase that attractiveness along those lines, and communities gain reputation for that as well. The new and renovated buildings under the energy code in the New York Stretch have shown data that they increase the value of homes. For example, the residential energy rating index method that uses home energy raters have been working towards getting that rating moved into the multiple listing service, among other things. It also, in terms of benefits for the actual community, it encourages the use of third-party reviewers, site inspectors, and what have you, because the best ways to comply with it generally support those types of folks, which helps take, if local jurisdictions take advantage of it, it helps take the load of code enforcement off a bit in the area of energy code. Bedford, for example, has long used this, and there's others in the Hudson Valley too. Back about 20 years ago, I worked with a bunch of communities to adopt Energy Star homes for New York as their local energy code. In a sense, they had a New York Stretch back then and are just changing over to a new one then. And they were well aware of and used frequently home energy raters for their residential code work and as a requirement. So there's precedent for it around the Hudson Valley. Next slide, please. So the energy benefits, of course, are clear. The cost savings are somewhere around 10%, under 11%. It's very cost effective. It actually, in most cases, meets the cost effectiveness for the baseline code, which has a statutory requirement of 10%. The interesting thing about the energy code is that it's really the only code that pays for itself. There's no other code, you know, plumbing, mechanical, any of that stuff that pays anyone back. It's just, you know, advancing technology primarily, and safety and health as well. So it is very cost effective. Again, less than 10-year, and this is a simple payback. It has, as we mentioned, greater greenhouse gas reductions. The residential requirements are near net zero. And what that means is that as programs that are promoting near net zero construction, residential in this case, can be taken advantage of or moved into from compliance with the New York Stretch. It's a step towards that. And there are incentives for that as well. And then, of course, you know, it's all of the energy code requirements and especially NYSERDA have variable performance requirements, such as blower door tests. You probably don't, most of you don't know what that means. And I'm glad to talk to you anytime about it. But these codes are becoming more performance related. Therefore, we know this stuff actually works after it gets built, because oftentimes it's tested at the finish of construction. Next slide. I really like to focus on the economic and the non-economic or non-energy benefits. We know that energy codes and energy efficiency is a huge booster. If you are aware of the American Consortium for an Energy Efficient Economy, they've for decades tracked this effect, that energy dollars saved in the community stay in the community. And that, you know, we are increasing the development of a green workforce every day, and building codes and building construction are part of that. We know that building construction is a huge part of local economic development, and assuring that it's energy efficient is even adds more to that, that impact. For example, if we save you know, 10% or 20% on energy cost through the construction of a higher performance building, that is money that helps companies' bottom lines. It helps homeowners' bottom lines, and they spend it in the community or invest it. So again, I mentioned that it offers a greater chance that code officials and jurisdictions in our municipalities will take advantage of the third-party plan review and site inspection services and specialists and raters in our communities to reduce the heavy lifting for a lot of code enforcement. That's really key, because for all you code officials out there, I know that you know, you're hard pressed right now. In fact, this last year has been unbelievable for all of those friends who in code enforcement in the Valley and around the state. It helps spread your resources as well. So again, we mentioned that property values go up, tenants and homeowners save money. An energy code compliant home, and particularly in the case of the NYSERDA with its increased ventilation requirements, give us a healthier, more comfortable building, especially important in this time with the COVID and such. And then for many people, they're really concerned about comfort. You know, are there drafts? Are there leaks? Are we comfortable in our buildings? That's another non-energy benefit. Next slide, please. So some of the quick, and not in super depth here, but some of the changes include improved window performance, improved insulation and air leakage testing, air barrier commissioning in the case of commercial building, a really important feature that that has been overlooked in commercial buildings. Why? Because back in the day, the heating and ventilation people said to us, don't worry about the building envelope, the enclosure of the building. We'll get it all with more efficient heating and ventilation equipment. Well, it came to the point where we could only squeeze so much efficiency out of this metal box, right? And and we found that we were creating a lot of leaky commercial buildings. So that's huge. Lighting and electrical, particularly in the area of higher performing lighting systems, better performing lighting systems, and also preparation for electric vehicles and solar PV reduces the soft costs of utilizing those clean energy systems. And again, higher efficiency for HVAC, that compatibility for adding PV and EV options. And on the commercial side, commercial kitchen and other appliances as well. So there's lots of options here, and we're able to better access them via the New York Stretch. Next slide. As for the economic side of this, and you all gotta tip your hats to NYSERDA and the great work they did and continue to do on cost benefit analysis, because, you know, again, if it doesn't work for everybody economically, it's not going to work for anyone else. The percentage savings, and this is a statewide average for commercial buildings, and this is substantial. There's about a 7.1% average. This is savings with an incremental cost of just about $1 a square foot. And again, this is an average of the statewide savings, about 10.5 cents, or 10.5 years, I'm sorry. Most important here, if you see that little asterisk down below, this is all before we take advantage of the much increased, particularly utility incentives, but also NYSERDA program incentives that can be utilized by builders and developers, property owners, to make that even more cost effective. You know, there are many areas where accessing those incentives can actually offset that incremental cost between, let's say, the base energy code and the New York Stretch. In fact, even do better in some cases. So it's really important that communities and others promote the use and coordinate with Con Eds in the Niagara Mohawks, or excuse me, National Grids of the world, and take advantage of that. Next slide. Next slide, please.
It's not working.
Make sure that your cursor is on the slide itself. Sometimes if you move your cursor off to like the chat boxes, it won't do it.
No, my cursor is, oh, there we go. Oh gosh, it took forever. I'm so sorry, my apologies.
That's okay, no problem. Looking at climate zone 4A, we see we have a simple payback, again, before any of the incentives are applied and design assistance in some cases from NYSERDA. And this is a big component of the construction done in all your municipalities here in New York State and in the various regions. So, and again, incremental first cost here is, as an average, is less than $1 a square foot. Next slide. Also, and likewise in the residential sector, your climate zone, which is climate 4, and I don't expect you to remember that you're in climate zone 4, it won't be on the test. We see an average annual energy cost of around $264 a year, incremental costs around $2,400, simple payback of 9+, and for multifamily 10 and plus. And remember that most of these economics are then built into a typical 30-year mortgage. So you actually, in most cases, end up seeing payback to, like a homeowner in this case. It's not great, but it's, you know, some dollars per month that you essentially receive right up front as soon as you do this construction by the New York Stretch Code. And again, this is all before you incentives. Next slide. There are a number of compliance paths available in the residential. What's most important here is actually the last one. The last one is the Energy Rating Index, which, as I said earlier, is conducted by what are known as HERS raters. Those folks have been working on, if you remember, the Energy Star Homes program in New York. It actually is a lead-in to Passive House and can be used to show the energy, the basic energy requirement compliance for Passive House. And that is a simple number for your particular home design. It does use those HERS raters. They do preliminary ratings for that energy rating index. For NYStretch, it's significantly better than the existing energy code 50, and mandatory provisions are required, the same as what's in the current energy code. So significant benefit to the Code Enforcement Office with this method. Next slide. On the commercial side, and Beacon was very, very impactful in, Bedford, but it's open for everyone. The use of a commonly used and tool for code enforcement officials called ComCheck that was developed by U.S. Department of Energy. They're very familiar with this tool, and through the support of NYSERDA, we were able to get a copy of this that's available online that shows and helps designers and builders, developers work up their designs that comply to the NYStretch code. So again, a great tool that makes it a lot easier. In the case of Bedford, they're going to have an engineer or another professional, as they listed in their code proposal, check this material over. So essentially it moves a lot of the time-consuming effort from the code official and gets that third-party assurance. Next slide. And here's, you see that this is just a screenshot of the ComCheck web that is available. You'll see that the 2020 NYStretch is one of the selections. This software is usable all over the country for many versions of the energy codes, both the International Energy Code, IECC, and the ASHRAE 90.1, which is a commercial building standard. Again, more in the weeds that you want to get to, but it's one tool that is used commonly in code enforcement, especially on the commercial side. Next slide. As Maryland indicated, many builders are already doing these kinds of projects. One example is in the city of Hudson, a very innovative reuse of existing buildings into residential units and commercial. I see Jim Hartford is saying, that's our project. Bravo. Great project that takes advantage of the same kind of technologies promoted in the NYStretch. Next slide, please. Creekview Apartments in Canandaigua, New York are, an affordable multifamily project that actually is both NYStretch compliant and net zero energy compliant. Does have some PV, that's what gets it to net zero and ground source heat pumps, and advanced ventilation to assure that our air is clean as it needs to be. And then it also includes passive house levels of insulation. Next slide. Zero Place in New Paltz, another example of the work that's going in all around us here in the Valley. That includes many of those same technologies and materials, off the shelf, not space age or anything like that, but great projects that we are seeing in our communities. Next slide. Lots of resources available for you. You have the circuit riders, myself and others. If there are, I'm seeing some friends from other regions of the state friends from Saratoga Springs up in my neighborhood. Adoption guides and model local laws. So you have a lot of the legal work started for you, at least, if not complete in total. Training and technical support from us, and then the main training that's coming down the line here soon. We have a bunch of tools that we're utilizing. You saw the ComCheck tool. And really important for code officials is that there will be one single volume code manual that includes our current 2020 energy code, and right over top of it, the NYStretch. So using it, referencing it, all works the same. The ResCheck is not ready, and I'm not sure if it will be, but the ComCheck compliance tool is available right now. The ResCheck, I think, is coming, but we can clarify that later, or unless you want to jump in, Marilyn.
Yeah, I was just notified that for some reason it's fallen off of ResCheck or the ResCheck website, and I will be contacting PNNL. It had been there, so there must be a glitch at the DOE website. But yes, there is ResCheck as well.
Thank you, Marilyn. There's a hotline that's been established by or is being established by the circuit rider primary contractor, Newport Ventures. And then, as I said all along, the NYStretch circuit riders, including me and a number of other great people, friends and colleagues, have been doing this for a long time. Next slide. So here are the folks you need to get a hold of. Of course, if you're getting into this from the clean energy communities point, you need to get a hold of your clean energy community coordinator, in this case, Carla Cavillo, and Anila Cherian for the Hudson Valley. As for the manager that we're going to be moving to, that is going to try to fill the shoes of Marilyn Dare here, but Christopher Scroy. And I highly, again, suggest you get a hold of those folks and see what CEC, what NYStretch and other programs can do for your community. I am the circuit rider for Westchester County, and Margot Thompson and Matt Evans from Newport Ventures are handling Putnam, Dutchess, and other statewide counties. I am assigned, just so you know, beside Westchester, the North Country region, where Anka is the CEC coordinator, and the Capital region. So with that, I think we've got it. Is there one more slide? I don't remember.
No.
Nope. Okay,
Mike.
thanks for being my memory.
Great,
Thank you all again. I look forward to seeing you.
Mike, there is one question that many people have asked that you address, and that is the question of renovations, additions, alterations to homes. Just in a little bit more detail, please.
Yeah, so renovations to buildings, any building, whether it's residential or commercial building projects, are they also, and by the way, I'm catching a comment here. Can we go back to the last slide for contact info? But remember, this will be available to you to download. But anyway, back to existing buildings, renovations, additions, that all works just like the base and current energy code. So whatever you got to do under the energy code, you have to do with NYStretch. From that point on, it gets pretty complicated because, you know, projects are so different from one to another. But generally speaking, any new addition to a building, residential or commercial, needs to comply with both the energy code and the NYStretch. Any renovation done to those same buildings has to kind of be on a case-by-case basis, but generally speaking, it's what is being changed during that renovation that needs to be upgraded. So, for example, if you're putting a new roof on your commercial building, you don't necessarily have to do anything more than add to the existing insulation or replace it with something that complies where before it may not have. So, you know, you may have to upgrade the insulation on the top, on the roof deck, but you don't necessarily have to touch anything else if you're not changing it. So it kind of comes down to what it is you're doing to the building. And that's something that should be also addressed in the training coming up. And if that didn't make it for you, you have my contact information. I'm glad to get on with you all, or if you want to set something up with others with the same questions, let us know and we'll set it up somehow or other.
Thank you, Mike. You are such a wealth of information. I will now introduce, declining that phone call, apologies. I will now introduce our next speaker. Anila Cherian joined the Hudson Valley Regional Council in October of 2020 as a Clean Energy Communities Coordinator. She works to promote local government engagement aimed at reducing greenhouse gas emissions, increasing energy efficiency and energy cost savings, and improving access to renewable energy. Anila has over 20 years of work experience with a range of UN organizations, as well as the Rockefeller and MacArthur Foundations. She has also worked as an adjunct professor at Mount Holyoke College and the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Anila is the author of Energy and Global Climate Change, Bridging the Sustainable Development Divide, and is finalizing a new book on climate change and clean energy. She is an active community volunteer and has served as the chair of the Village of Dobbs Ferry Sustainability Task Force.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm going to be really, really short because I think the most important thing is to be respectful for people's questions. And I'm seeing a whole stream of questions that we were trying to compile. So I just want to say that NYStretch, the Mid-Hudson region has been leading the way. And this is literally what leadership looks like. And we're so fortunate to have the mayor of Hastings on Hudson and the administrator from Beacon and the wonderful climate smart coordinator from Beacon, because they have sponsored something in the middle of a COVID pandemic. They focused on climate change and clean energy, looking, the adoption of Beacon on April 26th and Hastings on Hudson on the 18th of June, then sponsored what the mayor said was this chain, this almost enthusiasm in the river towns for continuing with NYStretch. And that's where myself as a volunteer for Dobbs Ferry, we were very grateful for the leadership of Mayor Armacost in sharing the wonderful resource of Marilyn Dare and Mike Dewine. They are extremely more patient and more informed people in terms of energy codes cannot be found. So thank you to Marilyn and Mike Dewine for allowing my own village of Dobbs Ferry to become an early adopter of NYStretch. Next slide, please. So I just want to quickly summarize what I always try to encapsulate NYStretch is having 4 C's. And I think all the presenters here have touched on them in different ways, but the really important thing is to recognize that it's climate responsive, clean energy focused, cost effective, but perhaps the most important piece is that it's community driven. And it's community driven with a way to becoming cleaner and greener. And the equity and the justice piece should also not be forgotten in the entire dialogue because, NYStretch is very, very clearly located in what is arguably not just the country, but the world's most ambitious climate leadership and community protection act. And locating NYStretch within that context allows us to see just how historic community action can be. And so I just want to put up this very last slide before I then move on to our contact information for Carla Castillo, my colleague, who is a clean energy coordinator, and myself. But again, it's really just important to remember increasing energy efficiency is key to climate, the CLCPA, but so is the part of community protection. And for smaller municipalities and the large city of Beacon and many other towns across New York State, this is, in our collective opinion, a really important thing to do. So let's just move on to the last slide, and we'll move on to questions. So just to let you know that Carla and I have divvied up responsibilities in terms of the Clean Energy Communities coordination role. As you can see, I have the towns and villages of the Dutchess, Putnam, Ulster and Westchester, and Carla has the others. So feel free to contact us. And she also has the county seats in the cities, and I have the city of Beacon. So please feel free to contact us. I know that Mike and Marilyn have been very kind in doing individual presentations, but that was one of the reasons why we thought this was a great idea to have a shared webinar. I know the village of Irvington, we had presented to them in December. Bedford had a public hearing on it. So Westchester is leading the way, but so are other counties. And hopefully this will sponsor much more traction on this. With that said, I'm going to hand it over to Rachel and the Q&A. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Anila. I'm going to keep my video off because I'm having a slight connectivity issue, but I'm going to pull from the conversation that we were just having with Mike. Some people just wanted a little bit more clarification about the renovation. So I think we can start there. So two questions. One says, so does this mean if someone renovates a kitchen inside an existing home that the kitchen only has to conform with stretch? And then another question along the same lines, if new windows are not planned for a renovated space, they would not be required to be replaced. So some specific examples, Mike.
Mike, you're on mute.
Answered online for everybody in the chat that no, in fact, if you're not planning on changing out the windows, you don't have to change them to bring them up to current standards. So no. The other question is if you're doing an interior model like a kitchen remodel, there's probably very little that you're going to have to do for that under the New York Stretch or the Energy Code. One example is, a lot of folks are really building up their cooking appliances and materials, and sometimes add some very high level exhaust fans. In that case, the Energy Code would require, if it's over a certain size, you'd have to have makeup air. So all that air you're exhausting out of the house would have to be made up, but that's required in the regular Energy Code as well. So, the stretch code really wouldn't change that at all. It mostly is involved with changing to the building enclosure as far as tightening it up and putting in more insulation, again, only if you're impacting that part of the building. For another example along that same line, if you are rebuilding a wall on the house, one of four, let's say, and you have the opportunity to put in more insulation to meet the New York Stretch, you don't have to touch the other three walls, okay? So a lot of things like that follow, again, the traditional, the current base Energy Code of 2020. And again, don't hesitate to get a hold of me specifically if you want more expansion. The impact on existing buildings is very complicated for most, including code officials who I get calls from weekly on that subject.
Thanks. I'm going to mention that we have just under 15 minutes for our Q&A section. I'm going to do my best to just get to questions that have not yet been answered in the chat. So if you put a question in the chat, do check to see if that answer has been entered in there. One outstanding question was from Dan Welsh. And the question was, are there best practices about determining greenhouse gas impact of adopting?
Well,
I was just going to say, For the most part, we don't have an exact how much greenhouse gas emissions are reduced by adopting NYStretch. We currently know that when you adopt NYStretch, you are going to be reducing, you'll have greenhouse gas reductions over and above what you would have had if you just stuck to the New York State code. I can't say whether it's an 11%, much like the overall average stringency of NYStretch over the state code, but we do know that you will save greenhouse gases. So, and
surely there's background that can help you convert energy savings, which are in, like I said, the great cost benefit analysis and reports that are available on the NYStretch code site. That's a fair, and there's lots of background on that.
Great, thank you. We have a question. I know that there were questions about training officials, but there's which was answered. There's an additional question: is there enough third-party inspectors to meet the need? Could this cause some delay in final certification?
So this was a program that NYSERDA had worked on for many years in training raters and HERS raters. There are, as my understanding, there are a lot of HERS raters on Long Island and in the Hudson Valley, but to be honest, I don't know how many there are. But as demand increases, then you would expect to see more of the HERS raters to become qualified. Mike, do you have anything to add?
Sure. Should not be a big issue. That on the residential side, there are quite a few HERS raters that are doing this work already for different communities. For the base energy code, I've got rater friends all over the state that are currently doing this as part of their regular work, because they are also doing some of the requirements of the base code for whole house air leakage or blower door tests or duct leakage tests as well right now. So NYSERDA has supported the development of these industries for a long time. We know from the governor's latest work and presentations on the green economy development that this continues. And you know, we're in pretty good shape in New York State on that. So it's all good. And many code jurisdictions, including 2 of our adopters, already send projects to New York licensed engineers or designers for third-party review. So we're in pretty good shape there, and no doubt, as they have all along, NYSERDA will continue to promote that kind of workforce development. Major effort there to do that. I did see a question here. I just wanted to touch on, if I may.
What one?
Yes. Yes. David Kim sent one to everybody again on the existing building stock. Properly adopting efficient and energy codes and enforcing them is the best way to help promote the improvement of our existing building stock. From a green standpoint, you know, not tearing it down, because so many times that happens in our communities. Not tearing it down, but you know, keeping it green, keeping it sustainable, and improving those sections that the code can impact for that project. Again, you know, what you change out, you need to bring up to code generally. And so, you know, that enables a significant improvement to our existing buildings, particularly homes, and particularly in low to moderate income areas. It's the one way a community can help that infrastructure stay up to speed and code. So it's a good way. Energy codes are the most cost-effective way to promote clean energy in terms of buildings that there is.
Can I make one clarifying point to a previous question and response that we made? and that is regarding the third party and HERS raters. NYSERDA doesn't require that there be third party review. There are different compliance paths, and one of them is a path that has the HERS rater as a part of it. And it encourages verification, excuse me, of certain elements like blower door testing and verification of ventilation and the like, but it's not that it specifically requires it unless the ERI path is being followed. Bedford has been writing some different requirements into their code that is going to require third-party review, but that is not currently a part of NYSERDA.
That's correct. The the move to third parties is a great move for achieving the best economic performance of the new home or building or the renovation. It just lends itself to that, and it's a place where the codes are going anyway. Greater performance that usually requires an energy performance professional to do that. Not required in the code in language as such, but as the folks in Bedford will tell you, it's something they're already using.
And Rachel, there was one other question by Robert Hothen regarding the calculated heating energy. That I don't have any number off the top of my head. It may be already in our cost effectiveness studies, which are located on our website, because there is a lot of background both for the commercial and for the residential stretch requirements. So if anyone is interested in getting into that level of detail, I would encourage you to look at those two documents on the website. And that's it. I've already provided to everyone the address, but that is nyserda.ny.gov/stretch energy 2020.
Lots of great questions and answers. A new one just came in. Does the stretch code require communities to benchmark current buildings?
It does not require current benchmarking of current buildings, but that is something that NYSERDA does support. And we have been encouraging that kind of an activity, but no, it does not require benchmarking. That would be something that if a community wanted to do that, it would be something to consider, but it's not a requirement of stretch.
Okay,
it is a potential high impact action. Anila or Carla might react to this for NYSERDA CEC program. Benchmarking is one of those action items that's very valuable. Not required by the code, but very valuable. But geez, does it ever give you a good look at what you are doing and how it impacts your community? You don't, you can't get what you can't measure, as the saying goes. And benchmarking is the great way to do that. I don't know if the CEC folks want to add to that.
Thank you, Mike. Yes, the only thing that I would like to add is that as both Mike and Marilyn have said, it was in the first round of the Clean Energy Communities program, and it is definitely going to be in the second round of the Clean Energy Communities program. And communities that have not taken on benchmarking as of yet, we are ready and available to support you through that process. We have basically a training package that reduces the complexity of benchmarking for communities so that it is a much easier lift than the depth that the Energy Star Portfolio Manager program basically makes you feel like you need to go through. We've made it easy for folks. So please feel free to reach out to us if you're interested in benchmarking. Thanks.
And just a couple of other comments that I'd like to make real quick, Rachel, because I know we're getting close on time. We do have a frequently asked questions document on our website that has a lot of information, and Nikki assured me that that was something that was she found very helpful. And the other thing to remember is that Mike and the other circuit riders, Margot Thompson and Matt Evans, have done a lot of code training, and I'm pretty sure many of your code officials in your communities will have had a code training from one of these individuals. They have a lot of information to share with the code officials to help them make them more comfortable with what adopting New York Stretch would mean. And I would encourage any town or community that's interested in this to reach out to the circuit riders and have them talk to the code officials. Anila?
Yes, I have a quick question that is coming up a lot. And, you know, Mike, you and Marilyn have had this question posed before many times by especially the mayor of Hastings and the mayor of Croton and many other mayors who are advanced guard in clean energy and climate, which is training. If you could touch upon the issue of Energy Code ECET training as well as New York Stretch training. This is a question that's come up repeatedly. So thank you for answering that.
Sure. So the training for New York Stretch, I thought I may have answered that, but I'll go through it again. The residential training is going to be available next month on New York Stretch, and the commercial training should be following around a month thereafter. As far as the Energy Code, the ECET training, which is a part of the CEC Communities program, I believe that is also imminent, and I will text my colleague real quickly and ask him to respond to that for us, okay?
Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you. Thank you to Sustainable Westchester. May I just do a quick shout out to the new leader of Sustainable Westchester, which is one of Westchester's and Dobbs Ferry's own. And thank you on behalf of HVRC for hosting Sustainable Westchester to the crew. Nina Orville, thank you for leading also on Dobbs Ferry.
We are so glad and proud at Sustainable Westchester to have Nina Orville as our new executive director.
And a formal announcement is going out this afternoon, but we have actually sent announcements to the press already. So thank you for sharing that with everyone. Everyone, yay, we're very excited.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor. And this is a wonderful event to be kicking off some of this work with. So thank you to everybody who is involved, and to Hastings and Beacon for helping to lead the way in the Hudson Valley in New York State. Thank you.
Yes, Hudson Valley, you're really being the leaders in New York on this thing. And I hope that some of the folks from other regions have listened carefully today and get around to catching up to you all.
Anila, I will add the information from my colleague regarding the ECET training, and we can include that in any response that we make post presentation so that everybody has that information, okay?
Wonderful, perfect, thank you so much. So with less than a minute left, we're on time. I wanna thank everyone for their participation, our speakers, co-hosts, attendees, for your questions and conversation, for your time, and for your leadership. It was a pleasure, and we look forward to working with you. So jumpstart your municipality's adoption of New York Stretch by reaching out to us today.